to welcome our first speakers, Claire and Stephanie, to set the scene in the SIAM world. So thank you. Over to you.
Thanks very much, Mark. I will share my screen. So if you could just nod if you can see that, please, Mark. Thank you very much for that. So welcome, everybody. Great to have you all here. As Mark mentioned, there is time for Q&A at the end, but if you have a burning question about anything that we talk about during this session, then please pop it in the chat and we will do our best to keep an eye on that as well. My name's Claire Agutter. I'm the founder of Scopism, and I'm here with my colleague, Stephanie Ward, and we're going to try and set the scene today to talk a little bit about the global state of SIAM, where it is in terms of adoption, maturity, and also evolution as well, how SIAM is going to transform and evolve in the future. So the topics that we're going to cover are the origins of SIAM, so where did it come from, the current state of SIAM and global adoption, how SIAM is evolving and how it links to some of the other trends that we see in our industry. We're going to talk a little bit about how it links to the more strategic drivers of organizations. And we're also going to talk about the SIAM community and how you can get involved if this is an area of interest to you. So Steph and I will be swapping between each other. So hopefully two voices as well makes this an interesting presentation for you. But as I said, any questions that you have, please do pop them in the chat, and we'll also share some contact details at the end. So the first thing to discuss really is the origins of SIAM and where did it come from, because anybody who's working in the IT space, the service management space, will know that the last 5 years in particular have been particularly overwhelming in terms of new ways of working. We've had, DevOps, Agile, Lean IT, Green IT. There's been an awful lot going on. So it's worth reflecting on where SIAM has come from and the business drivers that SIAM actually reflects. So if we think about the very early days of business operations, there wasn't any IT. IT didn't really exist for us. And what happened was gradually they were slowly introduced to organizations. And initially they were nice to have. They weren't something that was business critical to how we operate as an organization. And I think, an example there that I often talk about is my time in the UK Highways Agency IT department. And initially, as we started to use email for communication, some of the civil servants that I worked with used to print out copies of every single email and store them in filing cabinets as a kind of a just in case backup for them. And that was something that went on for some years. We had a lot of filing cabinets, but over time things became more critical. And what happened then as well is we lost the option for manual workarounds. Again, if I think back to experience I had in the retail space, things like credit card systems that we used to use, they would go down and we would have, card swipe machines that we would bring out and paper forms that we could use. Again, that's not an option anymore because we've become so reliant on the technology support, the digital processes that run our organizations. And as IT's become more and more business critical, what we see then is the adoption of management methodologies. So things like ITIL developed to try and support business adoption back in the 1980s. So as we became more reliant on IT, we realized then that we needed better ways to manage and support these systems that we were becoming more dependent on. We then saw first generation outsourcing. So initially what happened in a lot of organizations was IT was done in-house. So there was an IT department. We had our own servers, our own server rooms. But gradually, organizations started to think, this isn't our core business, and perhaps we are not as good at this as some of the organizations that have specialized in the provision of IT services. And this isn't something that's solely restricted to IT. We see this with things like HR, finance, a lot of supporting business functions and business capabilities. But as organizations started to specialize and the first big IT service providers started to offer their services to businesses, we saw this first generation of outsourcing. And typically what that included was long-term monolithic contracts. There would be one service provider that was doing IT. And this gave benefits to organizations, but created some challenges. So things like vendor lock-in, perhaps not owning the data that you thought you owned, some elements of transfer of risk. So as we matured in our approach to IT outsourcing, one of the things that a lot of organizations realized is these big monolithic contracts gave fantastic value in some areas, but not such good value in others. So you might have a provider who's doing amazing work in terms of software development, but you're paying 5 times the market rate for hardware support and hardware hosting. So we then moved on to the second generation of outsourcing, which was the transition to multiple providers. And that the language that was used at the time was that services were going to be grouped into towers. So, you had network tower, you had end user support tower, and it gave organizations more access to best of breed services. So it introduced complexity into the supply chain, but it also allowed organizations to work with a range of different service providers and more specialized services. But again, every time we
This meeting is being recorded.
We potentially find new challenges. And one of the things that happened here was the kind of the creation of silos and a bit of a loss of control over the end-to-end service. So we might be managing each of these individual service providers quite well, but were we able to see how all of these things were knitting together? And it's really at this point, this kind of second generation outsourcing, that we start to see the first references to service integration and management. Sometimes you see multi-service provider integration, or MSI, but this is where you started to see this. So going back more than a decade, really. But what SIAM done well allows us to do is to find this balance point between having access to best of breed providers and also being able to manage services end to end. So it introduces this concept of a service integrator function, which can be internally or externally sourced, but that service integrator allows us to knit all of these service providers into a cohesive whole. And what that will ultimately deliver is a resilient and flexible supply chain that allows organizations to flex, to scale, to grow, to shrink. And we can do that because we have this ability to add service providers, remove service providers. And one of the things that we're seeing as SIAM evolves is just how adaptable our supply chain needs to be. Our SIAM model needs to allow for really large contracts, but also the fact that we might engage with very specialist providers for a relatively short period of time. And just to give you a brief history of how Scopism and SIAM interrelate, because one thing that I do, want to emphasize and always do emphasize is, Scopism didn't invent SIAM. SIAM developed organically from mainly UK government. It was in the NHS and DWP that you saw a lot of the first mentions of SIAM, and then some of the large service providers took the concept and expanded it. But this slide just gives you a little bit of a timeline. So we've said 2005-ish for the first mention of service integration and management, because the date, I don't think it was recognised as being as significant as it was at the time, but that's roundabout when the term was first used in the UK public sector. And what happened then was SIAM thinking spread across government. SIAM was more broadly adopted, but also the larger service providers realised that this was an interesting market for them and their clients. So you saw organisations like TCS that are speaking today, who started to develop products around it. And in 2016, I founded Scopism based on trying to support service management professionals, because I could see that the industry was evolving very quickly, and SIAM was one of the areas that I thought looked incredibly interesting, but there wasn't really anything that you could pick up to learn more about SIAM at the time. There wasn't a set of books like there was for ITIL. So in 2016, we founded Scopism, and I set up the SIAM Foundation Architect Group, which was it was full of volunteers from right across industry, all around the world, different sectors. Michelle, that you'll hear from later, was a really key contributor. Martin from TCS were incredibly supportive, and together we discussed, debated, argued, and eventually the SIAM Foundation body of knowledge was written. And the idea was to try and define SIAM, so we had a common understanding and people could actually start to think about applying this in their own organisations. 2017, we partnered with Exin to launch SIAM Foundation certification. And then also in that year, we had a lot of people coming to us and saying, the foundation box, brilliant, but how do we do this stuff? So we went to the next level, and a lot of the first author group came back. We had new authors come in as well, and we wrote the professional body of knowledge and launched the certification. And really, Scopism and SIAM have kind of worked hand in hand since then. So we host a SIAM conference in the UK every year. We publish research every year through the Global SIAM Survey, and we continue to develop products like the SIAM Maturity Assessment and the SIAM Community, which launched last year, and Steph's going to talk to you a lot more about that. And in the future, we're looking at Scopism SIAM Assured, which will be an assessment of an organisation's SIAM capabilities. We're building partner models with a lot of the really innovative organisations in the SIAM space. And next year as well, we'll be refreshing the body of knowledge just to pick up some of the evolution points around SIAM that I'm going to touch on later in this session. So I'm going to hand over to Steph now.
Thank you. Thank you, Claire. So looking at where we're at today, then looking at the current state of SIAM and the global adoption, as you've seen from the previous slide, we launched our first global SIAM survey in 2018. So this year will mark our 7th survey in really helping us to see those trends and understanding how the adoption of SIAM around the world is evolving. So our research is based on respondents who are using SIAM, not using SIAM, but planning to adopt it, and those organisations who sell SIAM consultancy and solutions. I don't know, yeah. Claire's driving. The first section of the survey, so it looks at a number of demographics, including how it's maturing around the world. And each year we see the number of countries responding is increasing, which is good. And we see SIAM adoption becoming more and more global. So we've had over 1,500 respondents in over 60 countries so far. So on the screen, you'll see we've put the top 10 on there, and the top 3 sort of being similar each year. So we've got the UK, Australia and India. And as Claire mentioned, the history and the origins, the first examples occur in the UK, proliferation of outsourcing in India, and the great work that's been done in Australia to develop the SIAM knowledge and operating models. This data hasn't entirely surprised us. The USA is still fairly low, but the global reach, as I said, is increasing. So it is demonstrating that positive growth trajectory. And we do see that increasing in the community as well, which is really positive. We also look at organisation size based on the number of employees. So over the last 5 years, those adopting SIAM have typically been in those larger organisations with over 1,000 employees. But we know that SIAM can be applied obviously in any size or type. And while we see it in the bigger organisations with more complex supplier environments, whether it's applied in large or small, the principles, behaviours and practices are much the same, but obviously the roles and resources may flex to be more or less. We also know within this data, we have a number of large organisations that participate who sell SIAM consultancy and provide those service integration services as well. Oh, that's just our updated last year's, but again, very similar stats there. Again, so SIAM being applied in any organisation and industry, we also look at the industry analysis. So IT has continued to dominate the responses throughout the years, last year being 50%, so a slight increase on our average, and the year before that as well. But we do have other industries responding. We've got the public sector roots in there, but predominantly IT as expected at this stage. We do hear a lot of talk about enterprise SIAM. The data hasn't reflected it. Maybe it will a little bit this year, but Claire will come on to that in her slides as we look more at the industry trends there. We look at the challenges. Obviously, with any change, there's going to be a number of challenges. So we really look to understand these. And every year from each category of respondents, whether people have implemented it, they're planning to, or they're selling those consultancy and solutions, them or their customers are consistently experiencing or anticipating experiencing organisational change management, embedding new behaviours, and it is a reoccurring theme. Similarly with tooling and automation, and we also saw negotiating and renegotiating contracts in the top 4 this year as well. And then on top of challenges, we also look at benefits. So we want to understand both sides of it, what benefits are people experiencing, and what we typically see is, while we know that there are a whole host that can be really innovative and groundbreaking, the benefits that people are reporting are actually typically pretty low level. So things like better reporting, management information, and better supplier performance. So we continue to measure all these aspects and many more. This is just a snip of what we've got. But as I said, this year we'll be launching our 7th survey, which will go live in July. And having this understanding and awareness really allows us to understand how to best support those who've adopted it, considering it, selling it. And if that's you, I encourage you to take part and help continue contributing to the understanding and awareness there.
Okay, thank you very much, Steph. So, yep, keep an eye out for the SIAM survey going live this year in July. Share it with all your friends. I'm sure they would love to fill it in as well. Each year we try and make it the biggest one yet. I can see here we've got a question from Nathan. In the context of this data, Nathan asks, what is and is not considered SIAM, which is, that's a really interesting question. I guess it's self-determined. We have our definition of SIAM from the body of knowledge, which is that it's a management methodology that is applied to environments where services are sourced from multiple service providers. We don't repeat that in the survey. So I guess the survey respondents would be classed as self-defining what SIAM means to them, but I guess we do tend to promote the survey through our own network to the SIAM community in general. So I think there are probably very few people responding who don't have at least an initial understanding of what SIAM is. Although we do ask people every year, we do ask people about are they doing SIAM? And we do get some people who say no, and some people say we ask them why, and we get things like, we don't understand the benefits, our organization's not mature enough. So that there are some people who have just found the survey perhaps with not any knowledge of SIAM. And question there from Isabel as well: is cost optimization reduction a benefit which is reported or considered as part of the report? Yes, it is. It is at Isabel, and I believe I'm correct in saying, and you can download all of the white papers of the research from the SIAM community that Steph's going to talk about, but I believe I'm right in saying that last year we had a huge spike in the number of respondents who were reporting an interest in cost reduction. Now, we try to be quite clear that SIAM is not necessarily an instant way to cut your IT budget, because there is a cost to adopting SIAM, and it is more about optimization specifically. But one of the benefits that we do see reported quite a lot is people want to be able to attribute costs across their supply chain. So SIAM, I think, can give you visibility of where that spend is, which can then drive optimization. But like I said, we did see a spike in an interesting reduction in last year's survey, which I think perhaps reflects on the global economy at the moment. And Michelle's popped an answer in there as well. Okay, so a quick look at how SIAM is evolving now. So we've looked at where it came from, where it is now, where's it going to go in the future? And the kind of the first point is, is multi-sourcing meeting expectations? So based on our research, there is scope for improvement. So 82% of organizations want to have better performance from existing providers. That's quite a headline. And I think, coming back to your question there, Isabel, we've got, 57% of organizations want to be able to better understand service costs. I rant about this quite a lot, but I worked with an organization recently that had reducing IT spend by 20% as one of their strategic objectives. And that's not a strategic objective. What do you want to do? And then you can understand the costs that are associated with it and where you want to invest. But that's a high horse that I'll climb down from. But one of the ways that we're seeing SIAM evolving is a shift in the conversation to from an operation level to a more strategic level. And we sum this up as being a shift from SIAM conversations to target operating model conversations, because a lot of the first SIAM models were based around operational concerns. How do we manage an incident across 15 different service providers effectively? But as we've got better at doing that, as we start to understand that, the conversation lifts, and there's a lot of organizations now looking at operating model transformation, looking at introducing a more enterprise approach to SIAM and linking it to their sourcing strategy. So one of the things that we're definitely seeing is this shift in the level, and an appreciation of the fact that, SIAM's not an end goal, just like ITIL's not an end goal. It's about achieving our objectives, and having an effective SIAM model in place is one of the things that can help us to do that. And this slide here is based on some research that a member of our SIAM Leadership Council did, looking at the language that's used in tenders and RFPs in the SIAM space. And we can quite clearly see that organizations are very much looking beyond operations, and they're looking at developing a digital business model that's going to help them support their own strategic outcomes. So quicker prototyping and time to market, looking at data-driven decision making, and having things like compliance and security as well. So it's very much a different conversation now. And this change in focus then changes what organizations need to do. And again, I say this quite a lot, but I'm not a fan of the you must do this or your business will die. But certainly there's things that we can do to make our organization more adaptable, more resilient, and it can help us to leverage emerging technology as well. So what we're seeing is changes in how we operate, changes in technology, advancements in technology mean that organizations do need to adapt the way they do service management. Their customers expect different things, and SIAM can actually help to deliver that. And this slide here and the one before are drawn from a sort of a series of SIAM pitch materials that we developed in our community. And again, that's a free download that's available, and Steph will talk a little bit about what you can find in the community and where very soon. So I'm going to just do this fairly quickly because I know we are fairly short on time today, but just to quickly say how SIAM is linked to other service management trends, IT trends, and we can talk more about these in the Q&A if people want to. But we get the question, does SIAM work with DevOps and Agile? Yes, it does. SIAM focuses on end-to-end governance, and that allows all your service providers to work in whatever way is best for them while still being able to integrate into the end-to-end overall service governance. XLAs and experience management, do they link to SIAM? Again, absolutely they do. And what SIAM allows us to do is understand experience both at a single service provider and an end-to-end level and identify improvements there. Can we integrate cloud and SaaS services into our SIAM model? Again, the answer to that is yes. It can be a little bit more challenging because we need to be sure that we're getting the information that we need when we need it. You know, AWS, Microsoft are not turning up to your monthly supplier review meetings, but we can integrate them. And of course, there's a very clear link between SIAM and digital transformation because you are building a future-ready operating model for your organization. And then just a little thing about SIAM from the C-level perspective. So if your organization is asking questions like the ones you can see on screen, if you haven't already started thinking about SIAM principles, then these might be signposts that it's something that might help you. So for example, mapping and managing the vendor landscape, having a clearly defined sourcing strategy, having a roadmap for the future. SIAM can support all of these. So these are, if you hear these kind of discussions, it may be a sign that your operating model needs to evolve. And just a quick bit of research that I did about what's on the CIO agenda. Again, I don't know if this will resonate with people. Pretty sure security and sustainability are there for almost every organization. But again, SIAM can support all of these. So for example, if we look at sustainability, we can work with providers who build sustainability into the contracts and then manage that across the supply chain. So Atos, for example, build DLAs, decarbonisation level agreements into their contracts, and they are quite happy to be measured on that. So as I said, SIAM is about much more now than just can we fix this incident across 15 different service providers. And then Steph, I will hand back to you.
Yeah, so you'll have probably heard us talk about the community quite a lot, but a little bit more about then how we support people on their SIAM journey. So we have the global SIAM community, sponsored by our partners HL Software, Emphasis, and supported by our exclusive education partner Exin. 9 fabulous community champions, some of which are speaking today and probably watching live, so hi. And in the first 9 months, we hit 2,000 professionals globally, and I think we were pretty shocked between us. But the support that we have there, and our mission has always been to provide that, you can see it on the screen, but to provide that free at point of use. And we want it to be an inclusive environment for everyone where you can develop, support each other, and really we're just getting started. We've got our first birthday on the 6th of July, so stay tuned for something to celebrate that. But we've got people there, you know, asking the questions, providing the answers, and what we don't know, we find out together. So we host working groups, events in person and online, and we link out to those in the industry who are really providing quality content and information. So this one is linked out, you made the cut. But you'll see there, you know, the wide reach that we're getting. At the minute, we've got more countries in the community than we saw probably on our last survey. So hopefully, fingers crossed, we'll see that reflective in there as well. But we've got a huge diversity in there, and the engagement that we see inside and outside of it really is astonishing. But I feel proud as the community manager that we're reaching so many people and supporting so many people at various stages. So there's people brand new from just getting certified, perhaps graduating in various different industries, and all there for sort of a common interest, but wanting something different out of it, and hopefully we're achieving that. So I think we are. But how can you get involved then? So there's a number of opportunities available. As I said, the membership is free. It's quick, so it takes a couple of minutes to sign up. Obviously, the more information you provide, the more we can understand and help tailor your experience. So keep you notified of events, you know, other things that are happening that you might be interested in. So join, ask questions, share your wisdom and experience, be part of content creation, working groups, events, and we've also got a SIAM plus AI month. So we run a series that is SIAM plus data, procurement, whatever the hot topic is, and next month is AI. So join us live. Conscious of time, we've also got the Service North in-person conference on the 18th of November. Early bird tickets are available, and call for speaker has launched this week. So if you're interested or you'd like to know more about partnerships, please get in touch. And as I mentioned, the Global SIAM surveys, whole host of resources, bodies of knowledge, case studies, white papers. But yeah, have a look. The links there, we'll send this out. And yeah, thank you for listening. And if you've got any more questions, reach out to Claire and myself, and we'd be happy to help.